You know how all these modern lenses are so sharp, so clinically perfect? It has like super fast autofocus, very smooth bokeh, which is something that I probably need like 95% of times when I'm shooting a wedding, when I'm shooting a couple, when I'm on a job. But then there's this 5% when they're lacking this something special, something different, some interesting character, some vintage character, vintage look. And while this isn't necessarily a vintage lens, it's far from what modern tech has to offer. It has like tons of chromatic aberrations, is manual focus, it's not super sharp, and it's super heavy. And after shooting my first shoot with it, I was actually not impressed at all. I was like thinking in my head, like, is this lens any good? In general, this lens just until I hit that perfect light, that perfect sunset light, and then I went back to my computer. I started editing all these images, and I was like, whoa, I like that. I very much like that. And I actually ended up having the photo from this particular lens on my screen on my iPhone all the time, because I love it so much. Well, this lens is like a couple years old, TTartisan 50mm 0.95 for Leica mount, and I used it with a TechArt autofocus adapter on my Sony A9 Mark IIIs, and I want to share with you my experience and most importantly show you some photos from this lens. So this video is going to be divided into 3 sections. First, I'm going to give you an overview about this lens, then I'm going to share my experience with shooting it on my Sony cameras, both with autofocus and manual focus, so with the adapter and without the adapter, and then I'll share all the photos that I've shot with it. If you're new to this channel, my name is Magic. I'm a destination wedding photographer. I shoot Sony cameras mainly, and this is what I share on this channel. So I've been doing this for 3 years, uploading weekly about wedding photography and gear. If you're into any of that, please subscribe to the channel. You're very welcome to join me here. So this lens is actually a TTartisan, like, cheap version of a legendary Leica Noctiluxe lens, 50mm f/0.95, which costs whopping $13,000. $13,000. That's the price of the original Leica lens. Well, this one comes at $700, which is quite cheaper. Well, I don't have the original Noctiluxe with me, but looking at the photos, like they're quite similar in terms of the build. And then specifically, like the version that I have of this lens, this is called a titanium version. There used to be a black and silver version, which was much closer in terms of a look to original Leica lens. They are, I believe, sold out. They had like a limited run of these, and then I believe they have some left of this titanium version, which comes like a slightly different build, as you can see here on these images. This lens is all metal built. It has quite big manual focus ring, which is very, like, I would say, sturdy. It doesn't come light, which is good. Lens does extend a little bit when using the focusing ring, but it's not something like substantial. It doesn't make this lens much bigger than it already is. Then we have aperture ring, which clicks like this. It's also not as light as what I'm used to Leica lenses. So I own Leica Sumilax 50mm f1.4, and like the rings on that lens, they are way lighter than both rings on this lens. This comes with like a more resistance when you want to change both aperture and when you're manual focusing it. Then we have on the top we have the thread filter at 62mm. That's for titanium version. If you by any chance manage to get a black or silver version, these come with a 67mm filter size. This lens is not super big, but it's also not very small. This is it compared to my 50mm f1.2 G Master lens. And even though this one is lighter in terms of numbers, it does feel heavier because it's small and heavy. This one is big and heavy, and I feel like that heaviness kind of, this feels just like a rock, like a really heavy piece of rock that you want to throw. But yeah, I'm not going to be throwing $700 lenses. Also, it seems to be limited to 2,000 pieces because mine says here 0189 out of 2,000. So there is some limited run of these lenses. This is how it looks with a regular manual focus adapter on my Sony camera. I have to admit, it does look pretty cool. And this is how it looks on a TTartisan autofocus adapter on a Sony camera. And now let's talk about using this on a Sony camera. First, when using the autofocus adapter, I knew that there's a limit of that TTartisan adapter. Like the spec sheet of the TTartisan says it's limited to 500 grams. This lens is almost 700, so it's quite heavier than the limit, but it did actually work pretty well. There were moments that the lens was struggling and was like, I had a problem focusing, but then most of the time it was actually tracking. It was tracking the eye. It was working, and both me reframing the photo and, person, moving in the photo, but because of that slightly struggling character of the work, I thought the next time I'm going to use it on manual focus because, it's not as fast as I'm used to. I'm used to shooting G Master lenses, so, I get 100% of my photos in focus. Now I have lens that is struggling, so I figured the next time I'm going to use the manual focus, and that was a huge mistake because on a next shoot, I didn't bother bringing a TTartisan. I just mounted this on my manual focus adapter, and I was using my typical technique for manual focus lenses on Sony camera. So I have AF on button on back of my camera set to zooming in, and then I'm focusing on the ring and using the zoomed focus peaking, which usually it works really great. And when I was shooting, I thought it's great, it's easy, I'm focusing. But then looking back at these photos, none of these photos are even close to the sharpness of the photos that I was getting with that lens with an autofocus adapter. Meaning, whenever I hit the target with the TTartisan, it was sharp. It was right there when it's supposed to be, proving how good that system is versus shooting manual focus and me, focus peaking and thinking it's great. At 0.95 50 millimeters, the depth of field is just so tiny, I just wasn't hitting the target, even though I thought I was. So lesson learned, even though the lens is struggling on a TTartisan adapter, my recommendation would be you're getting much better results with the TTartisan adapter. The photos are just way sharper. You're getting more images sharp, even though sometimes you're not getting images at all. So that's what I'm going to be using from now on. And now, before diving deep into the images and me showing you the results, let me give a big shout out to the sponsor of this video, Imagine. So if you were wondering how I'm able to run this YouTube channel posting videos every week while sustaining my wedding photography business and how I edit my images, yes, I do have a little AI helpers that are editing my images, and that's what Imagine is. So the way it works, it learns how you edit your images. So you select a bunch of images, you have to select at least 3,000 images from Lightroom and create a profile based on that. Or if you don't have 3,000 images edited the same way, you can upload a preset and create a light profile based on preset. So I personally trained my own thing because I'm always editing my photos the same way using my Magicadabra presets. So how it works, I select my Lightroom catalog, I select the catalog folder collection I want to edit, and then I choose whether I want my images to be cropped, straightened, or do I want to add any mask. Imagine can add like a smooth skin effect on the faces with a custom mask that you can adjust and obviously change afterwards. And then I click send, and it takes roughly 15 to 20 minutes to get 1,000 images back in my Lightroom edited. This is insane, because after that, I only need roughly an hour to edit all of my images. I go one by one and just fine tune and edit my images, and I'm done. This is my third season using Imagine. I used it entire season this year, entire season last year, and a half season the year before that. And it's changed my life. If you want to change your life, there's 1,500 free edits waiting for you with my link only. Check out the link in the description, sign up and try it out for free. And now let's take a look at the images. So on the first shoot, we were in Croatia, and my wife Suzanne was kind enough to be modeling for me once again. And we did hit that perfect light. It was close to sunset. You can see the light peeking through the trees, but also the place that we chose for this shoot was literally perfect. Colors, cliffs, water in the back, depth of that forest. I feel this all worked really well with a lens like this, especially with the layers of the forest, sea and everything. It does come with a little swirl, I would say, like the bokeh, and I have to say it is my kind of bokeh. I love bokeh like this. I love the vintage character of that bokeh, so like not super smooth but just slightly crazy in the background. But the best part was, you know that from the title, when we hit that sunset moment and I started shooting backlit and this lens started flaring like crazy. But hear me out. Some lenses, they do flare in a weird way, that they're making some, weird colors on the image and, making the image not sharp or anything. This is not the case with this lens. I was getting a beautiful colors, shooting backlit, getting that really orangey, nice backlit look while retaining the sharpness and the contrast in the image, which is something I really like, especially for my backlight portraits. But you have to know this lens is far away from perfect. So looking at the other images, you can see how much chromatic aberrations there is. You can see the green, you can see the purple. So if you don't like that, this is going to be a problem for you. For me, okay, it comes with a vintage character. Even some Disney shows have like vintage character now with tons of chromatic aberrations. So, it's a choice. It's an artistic choice whether you want that or not, but it is definitely a flaw of that lens. And also there is so much vignetting. I have not seen that much vignetting in a long time in any of the lenses. So it does create like crazy dark corners on each of the images. For single portraits, that's fine for me. For couples, it might be slightly harder. There were photos that during the editing, I had to, bring back the corners because, the hands were just too dark or something like that. So, this is another flaw of that lens. But you could say that this is a vintage character, so this is what you sign up for with a lens like this, especially if this lens is not $13,000, it's $700. So do I recommend this particular lens? If you're looking at these images and you're saying, wow, this is what I want, this is exactly the look I want, I feel like $700 is not that much to get, the desired look. But then there are tons of lenses that will give you a very similar look to this, much cheaper, and a lot of them also coming from TTartisan, like vintage character lenses, Biotor kind of lenses. Like there's tons of options out there. Maybe they're not gonna be as fast as this prime, they're not gonna be 0.95, they're not gonna look that cool, and the bokeh is gonna be slightly different, maybe it's gonna be less sharp. But if you want just a vintage character, you can definitely get something cheaper. I personally will try to incorporate this lens for some of my shoots, some of my engagement shoots, and we'll see how I go with this because I do love the final images. Let me know in the comments what do you think about images coming from this lens and what's your take on the vintage character of lenses like this. Thank you so much for watching this video and I will see you in the next one. Bye.